Welcome, everyone. Hello, welcome to our panel today. We've got a lot to unpack here when it comes to generative AI. So we're excited for our discussion today. My name is Carolyn Anger. I'm the president of the Toronto chapter of ACEDS and a senior director at Concilio. It's a pleasure to see so many AI enthusiasts gathered here today as we embark on an enlightening journey into the captivating world of AI with a focus on generative AI. We really appreciate you taking time out of your day to be with us today. Before we get started, I want to tell you about a current membership drive that we have going on for the ACEDS Toronto chapter. From now until June 15th, you can save 20% on the ACEDS membership, certification, and training with the promo code TorontoMD255. I'll post a link in the chat to our webpage where you can go if you're interested in becoming an ACEDS member. And now, let me introduce you to the star of our show today, Josh Kubicki. Josh is the director of the University of Richmond's School of Law's Legal Innovation and Entrepreneurship program and is an assistant professor of law. He researches, tests, and speaks at the intersection of innovation, the practice of law, and the business of law. Over the last 20 years, Josh has merged his experience in fields of design, management science, and strategy execution to build service and products for businesses and legal teams large and small. He's a former chief strategy officer for an AM Law 100 law firm. He worked in Verizon's general counsel office and has served as an advisor to CEOs of leading alternative legal service providers and legal startups. He recently co-founded and built the first business design studio focused on the legal market, Bold Duck Studio, and he is the creator and force behind the Brainiacs newsletter, a publication that helps people keep up with the advancements in generative AI in the legal industry. I am a subscriber of Brainiacs, and I think you should be too. The newsletter is a daily update on all things generative AI and will help you keep up to date with all of the changes that are happening. I mean, since GPT 3.5 was released by OpenAI in November 2022, then GPT-4 came out in March 2023, the changes and updates are multiple on the daily. The Brainiacs newsletter is packed with insight, thought-provoking perspectives, and the latest news on generative AI. It's also a light, fun, and easy read, so you should definitely check it out. I'll pop a link to the newsletter in the chat so you can join if you're interested. So once again, thanks for taking the time to join us today. Our webinar today will unveil some of the magic from behind the curtain, so let's get started. Josh, I'll turn it over to you to kick things off.
Yeah, well, hello, everybody, and thank you for that awesome intro. I popped into the chat to everybody. Hopefully everyone can see it. Links to me, please feel free to connect both in LinkedIn and Twitter. Link to my free email course. Again, it's free. I'm not going to spam you. You get five daily emails, 5 in a row, get you up to speed on ChatGPT. And then obviously Brainiacs, the daily newsletter, which I think today is on going to be issue 79. I committed publicly to writing 100 consecutive days, including weekends, on this topic. I don't know what I'm going to do on day 101. I don't know if I'm just going to keep writing or what. But anyway, you can find all the past issues at that link that I put in the chat for anyone who's interested, and obviously subscribe. Yeah, so there's so many things to talk about, and I know we want to get like to the meat and the potatoes of this kind of stuff. So just kind of want to spend some time. Right now, each one of you listening is probably at a different level. There's probably some of you who don't even have an OpenAI account. And there's others who are deep in this. You've graduated outside of OpenAI. You're using domain specific AI tools, generative tools. Maybe you've been playing with image generation. Maybe you've got plugins, maybe you're writing code. So bear with me, all of you, because we have to sort of level set, and hopefully you guys will pick up something as we sort of baseline here. But that's why we've got Q&A and the chat, so that you guys can ask your questions. And if we don't get to it, again, I give you my contact info deliberately to interact, because don't forget, while I'm going to do a lot of the talking and walking through this, like, I'm still learning too. That's why I wrote the newsletter. I'm not like some deep technical expert that's going to lift the hood on all things AI. I'm very pragmatic, very practical. I come from the business side of law. So how are we going to use this tool to drive performance, productivity, profit, enhance the employee experience, both inside firms, in-house teams, and other legal service providers? That's sort of my angle here. I'm not here to school you on the technicalities of the nuance between NLP, machine learning, AI, and all that, although we're going to touch on some of that. So that's sort of just kind of who I am and what I'm going to do. Let's baseline here. I'm going to share my screen, and just bear with me here as I pull that up. And I'm not going to put it, I'm going to show a PowerPoint. I'm not going to put it in sort of the presentation mode, because then I lose the spot and I might jump around. So I will just close down my panel here. All right, hopefully everyone can see that just fine. All right, and so we have, there we go. All right, you already got who I am, what we're going to dig into. Let's just go into generally AI and where it exists. Okay, so we've been dealing with this term artificial intelligence for a number of years. Any of you who are from the e-discovery realm have run into this machine learning, natural language processing years ago, right? So none of that is new. And this sort of gives you a nice flavor of all the different functions and terms and models that we sort of have been used to leading up to this moment in time. One thing I want to point to you is, look at the right side. All those previous models, even machine learning and natural language processing, have all been like discriminative or task specific. So there's a good analogy. Like, there's a difference between being a master chef who can literally walk into any kitchen and look at the ingredients and create like some amazing gourmet dinner or some like street food, but it just tastes amazing, right? That's kind of where we are. Models before this, including machine learning and natural language processing, were really good at like making one thing with one set of ingredients. And they could make the best cake with this set of ingredients. And maybe they could tell you if some ingredients were missing, or they could give you some different flavors of cakes and all that. And that was wondrous many years ago. But kind of where generative AI sits, it's that master chef. It's like walking into any environment in any context, and we'll talk about context and why that is so, sorry, use a pun, transformative, going to sort of the nature of GPT here. It's the context which is setting generative apart. So like if you think about GPT-4, right? What preceded that? Well, there was a GPT-1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 3.5. With each model of what this was, and these are just corpuses of data and learning algorithms that were applied to these data sets as they grew, their abilities started to grow. Now, the transformative nature of this, the T in GPT, is truly what makes generative. And what that is, I'm going to show you here. If you think about what a large language model is, an LLM, these are the data sets that these tools have been trained on. On the left, which is an AI generated model, by the way, think of just an enormous warehouse of books and information and the web and all that kind of stuff. And basically these models took all this and like broke apart all the words. And you can kind of see that on the right-hand side. Now, like machine learning, what that was, like pre-GPT, it would look at those words and basically say, okay, if the word deer appears in a sentence, more than likely the next word, whatever it's going to be, woods, forest, hunter, gun, venison, is going to appear within proximity to that. And it was all mathematical, right? And we sort of got to understand that. The generative part, and where GPT-3 and then 3.5 and now 4 and coming soon 5, what that did is that went to context, right? So switching to this graph, it now, instead of looking at each word as a discrete parameter and trying to predict what other words might exist in it, what we're seeing now is that it's not actually doing this, but for our sake, this is the best way to conceptualize it. It's reading an entire sentence or paragraph, contextualizing it so that it understands how all of the words in that frame are relating to one another, and then it's predicting based on that. So for instance, like the word bank, if the word bank appeared in like GPT-2 or some of the machine learning models out there, technology would get confused. Is that a bank like a river bank or a bank like a financial institution? What we're starting to see now is, and that's a very simple example, is generative is basically able to understand by all the other contexts, oh, it's a financial institution. Now, the other amazing thing, and then I'll take a deep breath and pause, and Carolyn, you can interject with any questions or redirects. This large language model, it is still predicting. It's absolutely predicting. At the baseline, it's math, right? But these things have been trained so well, and we can go into training if you want, that they're interacting with us as though it's another human. It's returning its replies in a very human-friendly language. It has learned how to communicate human. And that's really the big separator here. Before, we had to learn how to speak machine, how to speak computer. We had to understand code. We had to understand, even going into predictive analytics, how to write a formula and an algorithm and all that. What we're starting to see and what we've seen is now computers can speak human back to us. And that's really sort of been the amazing thing in how we got to where we are. So anyway, I'll just pause right there. Carolyn, you want me to go deeper into anything, or I'm not monitoring questions or comments?
So no questions have come in yet, but I think one thing that's interesting that you could maybe touch on at this point is just how it is more of a collaborative tool. Like it's not the same thing as Google, right? Like you're not entering into the box. It's a chat box. It's meant for dialoguing. You're not going to put information in there the same way that you would into a search box.
Yeah, it's I see a question coming in regarding Merlin. No, I've not been able to work on that yet. I'd welcome any thoughts for someone who has. So thank you for that one. And yeah, to your point, and again, this goes back to you all might be at different places, but for the newbies, we've been trained over the years by Google. On the left, you see the Google search box to just put in the most one word, right? And let the Google algorithm, ad-based algorithm, add, return results to us. And so when we see what's on the right, which is OpenAI's sort of window, but Bing, Chat, and Bard, and all these, they all have sort of a message prompt window. Our initial reaction has been just to treat it like Google. And you'll see this. You'll see like, oh, and lawyers have been doing this. Oh, this thing's so dumb. You can't trust it. It doesn't return anything. Well, it's not a search. It's not a search tool. It's a reasoning model, right? So what is it doing? It's helping you reason. It's helping you refine your ideas. It's meant to interact with you in an ongoing dialogue. It's not meant to be transactional. It's not meant to put one thing in, wait for it to reply, and then you're done, right? Why would you do that anyway? I mean, you have Wikipedia, you have Google, right? This is a tool to refine your thinking. This is a creative tool to get your juices flowing. This is a good, and we can go into the different personas or sidekicks that I call them that you can sort of use to do this. But yeah, when you go to this window, it's best to think of it as beginning a dialogue. All right, let's go into some, I'm just going to keep going here because I don't know where people are in their learning. So if people have questions, I'm just going to keep kind of going here and you guys can sort of jump in. Real quickly, someone has already brought up Merlin. I'm just going to talk about, we're going to use ChatGPT today. And again, those of you in Canada, I think Bard is now available in Canada, although it may not be. I know Bing Chat is. Carolyn, you said something wasn't available. Plugins weren't available to you guys yet?
Yeah, the OpenAI app for
the OpenAI mobile app on iOS.
It's not available in Canada. Well, at least it wasn't yesterday.
One thing I want to point to is Anthropic Claude. So this was about, it all runs in my head. In the context window, and we'll get to this in a second. Let me show you here. For those that, if I can find it, I'll come back to that in a second. The context window where we actually enter our prompts. If anyone's played with this stuff, you can't like enter the entire, Romeo and Juliet story into there. It's just too much, right? So you can only enter a certain number of characters, or tokens is the word, the technical word for it. It's very restrictive, right? Now, Claude is able to basically ingest 100,000 characters or tokens, which is 3 to 4 times what generally GPT or OpenAI can do. Bing Chat is even shorter than that. I think they doubled it to 4,000 the other day in that space as well. So you are restricted in how much information you can put in here. One example I wanted to show you, and I'm just going to jump to an example because I think it's time to just get into this, is how to make sure this is sharing. Yeah, all right. Everyone should see my GPT screen. Okay. I have the plus version. So I can go back and forth between 3.5, which is the free version. If you pay for the plus $20 a month here in the US, you get a slightly faster model, and then you get GPT-4. And we can go through all this stuff here in a second. What I've loaded into this is the prompt window, is I've loaded in a segment of a master services agreement. Now, the master services agreement is it's something like, I forget what it is, 30,000 characters or more. It's too big to load into this. But what I want to do is take a real world scenario. So I'll just take one from my agency. So we do work with large law firms, and we're a design agency, advisory work, consulting work, and all that. So we're not really working with data like a lot of you in the e-discovery and data realm. We're not hosting data. We're not interacting with data. But yet this MSA, this master service agreement, had extensive data protection and privacy provisions in it, right? And a lot of it was due to the EU's GDPR, which I guess today's the 5th birthday of. Thank you for that. I was nervous about agreeing to that. Now, yes, what are the chances that I'll ever be held accountable for anything? Slim to none, but I'm a lawyer, so why would I agree to anything that is not pertinent to the agreement, to the nature of the engagement? So I just want to show you, I preloaded in all this language here, and this is my prompt. It's just, here is language from an MSA that I'm being asked to sign in order to conduct work for a global law firm. We are a small design agency that typically does not obtain, interact, or otherwise store sensitive data. Please review this language and flag any major issues, risks, or undue burdens we might experience if we sign this. Now, just stop right there. Most people, what I've seen is when they're interacting with this, is they'll say something like, analyze this MSA, summarize this MSA. Okay, it will do that. These models will always respond to you, but you've given it no context, right? So here, I'm saying that it's from a global law firm. Now I've anonymized it, this MSA. So all identifiable information has been scrubbed. So when you read this MSA, you wouldn't know it's from a global law firm. If I didn't tell it what I am, it wouldn't know what I am. It might think I'm a manufacturer of widgets. It might think I'm another law firm. It might think I'm a family looking for a will and estate planning, right? So it doesn't know. So I gave it context and I'm focusing it tightly on this data issue. So I then just copy and pasted all of this in. Again, I anonymized it. If you put anything into these models, it's no longer private, confidential. It's considered released into the public. We can get into how this data is used in this window. They do train on it unless they can train their model on it unless you turn it off. So let's just see. Hopefully I don't have to reload this. I'm just going to copy and paste all this just in case, because this window's been open for a while and OpenAI's had some downtime today. Nope. So it's too long. Okay. So that's fine. This is what I'm going to do. So I am just going to repaste. And up here, I had confidentiality stuff. So I'm just going to take that out. What I really wanted was the data, but I wanted to show you all sort of what happens when you load too much in. It just simply says, you know, thanks, I'm full. So I'm not going to be too specific on this. I'm just going to cut it right there. Okay. It's okay. I cut it in the middle of the word, but because I'm prompting it to focus on the data, it's going to know to not really pay attention to all this. It may draw some of this stuff in. It's not perfect. Well, let's see if that one. Server while processing. Oh, so here we go. We're going to have issues with OpenAI today. Hang on one second. I've got a backup for this. Don't worry. Let's just reload. And this is the awesome thing of doing live demos, Carolyn, is we're going to have issues like this, but that's okay.
We're all used to technical issues, especially during a live demo.
The good thing is it's not my tech, right? So usually this is, here we go. I think it's thinking, this is not my product. So if I was like a vendor, like pitching you OpenAI, this would be those embarrassing moments like, oh, this
Yes.
never happens. You can see how slow this is. Generally, this is much faster. So you can tell there's definite issues on the back end. So this is going to take forever, my gosh. Basically, though, what this is going to do is going to flag and read all this, and we'll move on and let this kind of work in the background. It's reading all that information. But remember, the one thing I want to point out with this is it's running its prediction model right now, right? So everything that it knows about master services agreements, everything that it knows about small design agencies that it's learned, everything that knows about global law firms, everything it knows about GDPR, data privacy and protection, all that is in its quote unquote brain. And so what it's doing right now, it's analyzing all of that and it's predicting the context in which it should reply and which words it should choose. And this is where it looks like it's thinking. And I guess it's the computer thinking, but it's not how we think. The reason why I constantly bring this up is because look at how authoritative this is going to be. Look at the language that it's coming back to. It's very persuasive. It's speaking like an expert to us. So let's go into some basic stuff here. So restrictions on, so this drew in some of the confidentiality stuff. It's just using plain language to tell me that I can't use the firm's name, publicly in any way. Now, if I went to the contract, I could pull that up and show you. We all know, we've read lots of contracts. That doesn't say it that simply. It probably says that in quadruple the amount of language and probably a hitherto for or something like that. Sub-processing. So this is a good one. It's telling me I can't subcontract the processing of law firm X personal data without prior written consent. Now, you may all think, well, no, duh, if you guys negotiate this on a daily basis. But if you're a shop that doesn't necessarily do this kind of stuff, you wouldn't know you can't subcontract that stuff. Now, the one thing I don't like about this is it didn't really hit on what issues I would have signing this. So I'm going to prompt it again. This goes back to the dialogue. Now, I'm always polite. And there's a debate on whether being polite gets you better replies or not. I say as best practice, it actually does. I feel it does. But you did not quite answer my question. By the way, my spelling's horrible, and it's okay because it usually does fine. What red flags are in here for me to consider or not agree to? And how can I negotiate around them? I have no idea what this is going to say. It's apologizing for misunderstanding me. So anyway, you're going to go on. We don't have to go on and on with this one, but you can kind of see, here we go. Now it's starting to get to a little bit more meat and potatoes around this, right? It's telling me to limit the scope, extend the time frame. You can see it's giving me guidance. It's not here. I'm just going to stop it here. So right here, you can see it's telling me you might want to consider clarifying the types of personal data, right? Ensuring liability is proportionate and reasonable, not unlimited. Now you start to see the magic of this. It's actually coaching me. And that's the way I'd put it. It's coaching me, not necessarily advising. You could say it's advising, but coaching just feels better because I know I still need to verify this. But anyway, that's sort of an example. I'm just going to pause there for any sort of reactions or thoughts.
I mean, I think it's a great tool for small businesses, in particular, sole practitioner, people who have to deal with different kinds of contracts on a daily basis. I know when I was doing some consulting on my own, I had one client who I was doing like a small amount of consulting for, was like maybe $15,000. But they sent me this contract that they literally use for like their multi-million-dollar contractors. And it was like 20 pages long, but was their standard format. And that's the document that I had to, so I had to pay my lawyer like $1,000 to go through it, which is a lot on my tiny little contract, and we all know, like, most contracts are still not written in plain English. They still contain a lot of legalese, and they're just very sort of cumbersome and kind of confusing to read through. So aside from the fact that we don't want to be putting any confidential or personal information in, you can anonymize it, and feed that through. So it's a great tool to have to help you sort of speed up your contracting process.
Yeah, it is. And I know anonymizing, you got to be careful about that. I understand. So I'm very, be very cautious with that and kind of do what I did, which is, I'm just reading a question here. What plugins are firm using? Okay, let's go to plugins real quick. And then I'm going to go into breaking down a prompt, because I think it's really helpful for people to understand. Because it's lots of people have been saying garbage in, garbage out. Yes, that's true, like anything. But I want to sort of help people with prompting. And these prompt concepts or framework works across platform, right? So that's the thing about generative AI. Whether you're generating an image, you're on ChatGPT, you're in one of the legal specific tools, or you're in Bard or Bing, knowing how to prompt is very important. But because we have a question, I just want to go back to plugins real quickly and show everybody plugins. So if I can find my screen, here we go. Okay, hopefully we got it. All right, everyone's seeing my screen. All right. So with plugins, so when GPT-3 first came out, 3.5, it was a closed universe. The model was only trained up until September 2021. Previously, think of it did more than this, but ingested all the internet as we know it today up until September 2021. So it didn't know anything beyond that. Now, Bing Chat, when that was released, that's connected to the internet. So that's able to get like real-time fresh stuff. Bard too. OpenAI didn't until they sort of just recently announced that you can connect it to the browser, internet browser. And earlier this week or last week, again, it all runs together in my head. Microsoft and OpenAI, which are they're very close partners, announced that Bing would be the default web browser. So now you can use, like if I just search, see it's on default. If I just put in a prompt, it's not going to go to the internet. If I click that on, it will now go to the internet. But with GPT-4, the robustness, the wizardry, magical replies are toned down a lot when you go to the internet right now because it's still new. Now, plugins are basically utilities. They're ways to extend the use of GPT-4. And you can see I have some preloaded. So ask your PDF or chat with your PDF. This goes directly to being able to cut and paste an entire document into the window. Like if I wanted to load that whole MSA in, I couldn't because it was too much information, as you saw, arrowed out. So like ask your PDF is a tool where basically you can upload into Ask Your PDF. You get a doc ID number that you can then load back into GPT-4. It will then make a call on that doc ID number and then basically analyze that entire PDF. It does take some time. It is slow. Hopefully the plugin store will show up. You can see it's been slow today. It collapsed earlier today completely. But you also have things like, I'm blanking, OpenTable, Zapier, Instacart, and all that. So like, the example is if you wanted to create a cake, I want to make a cake and this and that'll create a grocery list for you, then connect it to Instacart, and lo and behold, it'll be delivered to your house later that day. You can see that the plugin store right now is a little wonky. I'm not able to pull up the entire thing. And this sort of happens. But let me go back to the prompt real quick, because I want people to definitely get this. I'm going to show you three personas or three sidekicks. I call them the sidekicks to use. A prompt is just the beginning of the conversation, right? It's an instruction. It's a request. Everyone, when this first came out, were writing poems, song lyrics, jokes, short stories, right? Like I could put into the prompt, like create, an 80s hip hop song about generative AI and legal, and boom, it actually did. It actually created a good one. And Carolyn, you had a good one too, that you generated something. It was kind of profound.
Yeah, that was the haiku. I asked it to try writing some poetry, write me a haiku about robots taking over the world. And this is the haiku. It says, in steel hands, power, silent rise in twilight hours, world echoes, ours now. Spooky.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing pleasant or sunny about that at all. Well done. So yeah, that's great. It shows you the creative juice, but let's get into these real quick and I'll run through these quickly. And I shared these on LinkedIn. I'll try to drop the link in. So these are, it's a carousel on LinkedIn in one of my feeds. If you scroll through my profile or activity feed, you'll see all these so you can get them. So one is think of it as your intern or assistant, right? So what might you need from an intern? Think about it. Literally, if a free intern showed up, how would you use an intern? And then think about how are you going to instruct them? Most interns, no offense to any intern, they're kind of blank slates, like they don't really know the domain or context. You wouldn't treat them like a Google search window. You wouldn't just say groceries, right? Like you would give them instructions. That's how you need to think about that. And what do you want back? Again, an intern, they may be able to go do something, but maybe they've never existed in a professional context before. So, okay, I want you to go do X, but I want you to give it back to me this way. So these are some example prompts down here. Please summarize in a short paragraph. Okay. So I didn't say just say, please summarize. Please summarize in a short paragraph and include bullets for key points, quotes, or figures, and then paste your document data there. That's it. That's most people say, please summarize, and they're going to get back a very bland summary. It's generic. Or below is my document. Please proofread and edit it to have correct grammar and structure. Most people would stop there. But notice, and professional but friendly tone, and fix any typos. Just something adding professional and friendly tone will dramatically change the reply you're going to get back. If you're writing emails, right? Say you need to write an email to a peer that you've never met before. You're going to use a different tone than if you're writing an email to your boss or supervisor, right? In terms of the amount of information you're going to include in an email as far as tone. So those are some examples of intern and assistant. And I broke a bunch of these down in the Brainiacs newsletter a few days ago. So this goes to tone, style, and voice. Let's go to a coach mentor sidekick, right? So if you had a free coach or a free mentor, what do you do with a mentor or coach? You seek guidance or information, or they help you learn something, right? Or they got specific niche knowledge and expertise. So let's look at a prompt. Let's look at this first one. For HR or legal leaders considering if and how to write a ChatGPT use policy, notice the typo, list out creative and informative features, as well as creative and helpful benefits of a webinar focusing on creating a GPT use policy. Now I forget what I point out here. Yeah. So I'm priming it. You don't have to worry about that. This isn't a lesson on us, but I'm giving it context. I'm saying for HR or legal leaders, considering if and how to write a ChatGPT use policy, right? And I'm saying webinar. I'm not saying a meeting. I'm not saying an email. I'm telling it specifically what I'm doing. There's another word in here that I'm not highlighting here is creative. There's a couple of power prompts, I call them, that tend to really, if you use them in your prompts, they absolutely refine and create stronger prompts. Let's look at the second one. What are the unique elements and structure of a statement of work, SOW, in the lithium harvestings market? I know nothing about that. When a buyer wants to pre-order lithium that has yet to be extracted and produced. I was watching 60 Minutes several weeks ago and was talking about this. And I was like, okay, well, if you're a lawyer and you've got a client and you've never done this work, say it's a telco, they use lithium batteries and they want to pre-buy this stuff, and someone asks you, I was like, man, I go to my mentor. I don't know, just ask. Now, this is not disclosing any client information, but when you put this in, lo and behold, it will actually create a statement of work. And you can refine and do all that kind of stuff. So it's be very specific with these prompts. Again, don't disclose personal or client information, but be as specific as you can. It's amazing what these things return. And then sort of the last one, the sidekick, I call it the muse or the creative, right? It's the blank page problem. Like say you have to write or come up with a new idea. How do you get some fresh thinking? Maybe you've just been in a rut. Maybe it's 4:30 on Thursday and you still have to write something. Maybe it's a white paper that you've promised yourself you're going to write. Maybe it's a social media update. Maybe you just got to write an email to your team, giving them some energy and focus on a project. Who knows, right? And you're just like spent, right? This is really good for content creation. Now, this is a long prompt. I'm not going to read it to you, but this prompt is something I've actually used for business of law professionals and lawyers who want to get into teaching, either as adjuncts or they want to do a CLE or a webinar. And I basically set this up. This is the exact prompt, role playing. So you're meeting with a law school dean and you're basically trying to come up with 10 ideas around 10 specific courses that you'd want to teach that are non-traditional, right? That are sort of more modern in legal education. And so you basically feed it, you cut and paste your resume after this prompt, and it goes through, and I'm not kidding, it will generate 10 specific courses. Now, will they all be winners? No, 5 may be kind of, okay. You told it 10, so it's always going to give you 10. but I guarantee a handful of them are going to be really insightful. Now, yeah, it depends on your resume. You might want to feed in your LinkedIn profile. You might want to feed in just do a brain dump of notes of your experience. It doesn't have to be your resume. Now, the great thing with this is, say you wanted to geek out on this, you could go a step further and have this actually create learning objectives, a curriculum, the syllabus, the pitch, the email to the law dean of the law school that you actually want to go pitch this to. You could do this with this all in under 20 minutes and be ready to roll. That's sort of the amazing thing with this. And yes, we can talk into marketing and all that kind of stuff, but if you really think about these personas, intern assistant, coach and mentor, and muse and creative, there's so many more, but these are some really good basic foundational blocks for you to have in your head around how to think and work with these things. I'm going to pause there for any sort of reactions or thoughts and stop sharing.
Any questions or even thoughts from the audience?
Oh, there's some in the Q&A. I'm trying to.
There we go.
Okay. So how can you determine the authority behind the specific guidance you get? I love that question. Awesome. Depends on the tool. So Bing Chat and Bard, I'm not going to reference Bard. Bard just is not where it's supposed to be right now. So I do not use Bard at all. It's getting better. These are all getting better. Those, because they're connected to the internet, will actually give you references and resources that you can click through and actually read and verify they're real. Obviously, you've got to determine if they're credible. Just because it's pointing you to a website, an article, or paper, yeah, it's telling you where it drew it from, but you still have to determine, is that credible? We know in the age we live in, there's lots of things on the internet that may or may not be credible, but have an article with them. For OpenAI and ChatGPT, there's verifier and validator prompts. That's my language. Whenever ChatGPT is giving you a reply, you can always go back and say, okay, how might you improve your last response in terms of accuracy? And please indicate verifiable resources that you use to generate that. Now, this is the mind bend that you've got to sort of remember. ChatGPT is not thinking. It's looking at your language in context. So it doesn't really understand what you're saying. It doesn't necessarily understand, oh, they actually want a credible resource, and I'm going to go get it for them. They know that that's what the language, so they're going to return a response that is very responsive to that. So it could still make up resources. It could still make up references. You can refine it and shape it. Those prompts generally do work. How might you make this more accurate? How could you strengthened your last reply? You can do that. Always, though, always proceed with a high abundance of caution and always verify independently any of the references or resources, even when you're using OpenAI's browser connection right now. So that's sort of guidance on that. So second one, how am I integrating OpenAI into his teaching in classroom? Real quickly, I'll geek out on that with anybody offline. I encourage my law students to use it. In fact, my final paper, I insisted they use it. Now, as a professor, I can't be lazy. I've got to design a writing assignment that makes it very, very hard for them to just put it in the OpenAI and then copy and paste. How do you do that? You ask very specific questions of dialogue that happened in class that there's no context for, and you ask for personal reflection. And there's a number of mechanisms there, but I absolutely didn't run away from it. Going forward, I'm going to use it a lot more because honestly, I think it accelerates learning. It helps students get up the learning curve much faster because many law students lack context of what the legal market actually is like. That's one of the things I always say is like, my gosh, like we didn't know all this stuff. And I can use those tools to like amp them up much quicker, but I'll put a pin in that. Happy for you to follow up with me offline and go into that. Is the data for lawyers safe when you upload data? Are there any privacy rules, laws around uploading data into ChatGPT, or do you feel building a secure environment via the API? Yes, 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 yes. Whenever you load or share information into ChatGPT, before several weeks ago, it automatically was ingested into the model and they could train the model on it, meaning all that information, all your prompts and all that, it was just ingested into the big corpus of data that it's using. I can go into sort of examples of that. Now they have that turned off. You can turn that off so that it doesn't go into training, but it's still in the public domain. It's still, you have to treat it as though it's in the public domain, anything you put. So yeah, if you want a strict private proprietary sort of version of this, building that, many of you probably have, many of you are probably working on it. There's already commercial providers doing this. Absolutely. And whenever you're dealing with those, make sure that you completely understand how your data is going to be used and all that. But in terms of these public facing models, yeah, I'd be very, very careful about what we're putting in there. All right. Just reading some of these. Is there a way to tell that something was generated through ChatGPT? Yes, there are ways. There's many tools that are out there in the market. I listed, sorry to keep on pushing brainiacs, because my mind is just a mess with all this. There's so much, but there's a brainiacs issue. It was probably last weekend. I gave 10 tools in it that you could use to determine if anything was generative AI generated. That was a mouthful. Some are better than others. I actually included a table as well as to what their strengths and weaknesses are. If you want to follow up with me after, I can try to point you to it. But again, I think it might have been like last weekend's or near last weekend's Brainiacs, if you go to that and sort of search back issues. How to cite case law from ChatGPT? Don't. Just don't. It knows what a site looks like. Again, remember, it's not actually cognizant. It's only mimicking us. So often you will see cases, and they might be like Brown versus Board of Education. Will it get that case citation correct? Yes. Because think about how many times that exact citation was used on the internet prior to September 2021. Millions of times probably. So it knows that. But if you ask it for cases, it knows that you want a case, and it knows that you want it in citation form. And it probably knows what Blue Book form is too. So it will absolutely give you, but it doesn't necessarily mean to be a real case. It's just going to emulate what a real case is. So if you ever get cases returned in a prompt, please verify it, shepherdize it. Sorry to age me there. Site check it, put it in and verify that it's real case law. ChatGPT is 100% non-reliant in that. As a lawyer, I get very nervous. Does it get some right? 100%. The big ones, it's going to get right.
I think you want to be checking any citation.
Yes.
Footnotes or anything like that it comes back with, because oftentimes they are not correct.
So another question is, can ChatGPT generate pleadings? Yes, absolutely. Again, don't put in any identifiable information. There are a number of examples. Everything from avoiding eviction. It can walk you through the entire process, and as well as generate sort of the pleadings for that, to getting a mid-market M&A deal done, from due diligence and all that. It's very good, but I would consider anything you get being 60 to 80% really good, and you're going to have to build and refine on top of that. But it gets you more than off go. It's really, really good. But again, be careful about the information you're providing. You can put some facts in, but don't put in so many facts that you could tell who people are and where it happened, right? So just sort of keep that in mind. How do I access extensions? You're on a waiting list. If you go to OpenAI's main website, I don't know exactly where it is, but you got to you've got to sign up for the plugins. It's on a rolling wait list. I got them because I signed up a long time ago. Again, I don't know. It's very country specific right now, so I don't know what Canada's timeline is on when you're going to get access to plugins. But until they release them widely, publicly, you're not going to get them. So go and try to get on a wait list, or Google. You go back to Google and use that. And generally, they are for the paid. They're for GPT Plus. So in the US, that's $20 a month. Yeah, another one question. Which resources are best for filtering out reliable AI tools and prompts versus fluff? Such a great question. I wish I had an awesome answer for you. I've been warning people, especially with the release of the mobile app. Even before the mobile app, there were so many apps that were using the logo look very similar to OpenAI's, and it was all malware. There was so much garbage trying to trick people into downloading this stuff, and a lot of people got completely annihilated. Like, yeah, I mean, if you just scroll through, right, all the stuff says ChatGPT, ChatGenie. None of this is the official app. Even like that one looks, if you go too fast, like the open, it's not, right? So be very, very careful right now. There is no way to filter this stuff out other than go with the brands that you know and you can verify. There's so much malware and phishing going on in this space right now. It's unbelievable. That goes for Chrome extensions. I will not use a lot of Chrome extensions right now in this stuff because the privacy issues on it are horrible. I always look over the privacy and terms and conditions of anything. I actually will use ChatGPT to review them. I'll dump them in because they're usually short, and I'll say, what are the red flags? I put that in a LinkedIn several weeks ago too, a prompt to do that. And you'll see a lot of these privacy notifications. Some of these don't even have them. Definitely don't use those. If there's not T's and C's, terms and conditions, don't use those either, but review them, but stick with the brands that you know, definitely. All right, Carolyn, do you have any that you need to address live? I don't want to take up all of these.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, any comments on jailbreaking?
I got one on jailbreaking I can take.
Yeah, you take that.
So jailbreaking is interesting. And there's actually something going on this today in the Brainiacs, a bunch of Reddit users, which Reddit actually broke a lot of this stuff. If you go into Reddit and you go into ChatGPT, there's a bunch of subreddits and all that, anyone who's been on Reddit knows. You'll find anything you want there. These models were trained to, one, always be responsive, right, to the prompt, and always maintain certain parameters in how it replies. Like it's taught not to repeat itself. It's taught not to disclose certain information. When these first came out, people were using them to, like, how to create bombs and do bad things to bad people and to good people, and to go places and create destruction and death. Some were doing it silly, some were doing it possibly sincere. That was very prevalent in the early days. Now, these models have gotten smarter. They've restricted a lot of that. Jailbreaking refers to breaking the safety parameters that have been put in place to get behind the curtain, so to speak, of those parameters. And that's how you jailbreak. The most infamous jailbreak is DAN. That was the acronym, Do Anything Now. So it was sort of an alter ego to ChatGPT, Dan. If you ask Dan how to build destructive things or how to create carnage or how to hurt the massive amount of people in a public area, it would do that. It would also swear. It would also curse. Those are some really bad, evil things. But Dan was also funny. If you wanted to create lyrics that had profanity in it or tell off-color jokes for whatever reason, Dan would do that. You can use jailbreaking for a number of reasons. A lot of reasons why people jailbreak now is because some would argue, and I'm not taking a stand on this, that because of bad behavior, they've restricted these models so much that the replies have become less sharp, less crisp. They're a little too PC or careful now. In legal, it's very easy to get a reply that OpenAI will come back and say, basically, you're asking for legal advice. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not going to reply. I suggest you go seek counsel. And it could be the most benign request. You're not actually seeking legal advice. So it's a pendulum. They've kind of undercorrected at first, people doing silly things. Then they overcorrected. and there's kind of like coming back to this happy medium. So people use jailbreaks for a number of reasons, but it's good to know about jailbreaks because they're sort of interesting. Did I use any ChatGPT to create any of today's material or content in your Brainiacs News? Of course. I eat my own dog food. Without a doubt. I treat the way I use it is basically in the creative and muse mode to help me think of fresh ideas, to help me think about the learner's journey. I used it. I've got firms reaching out to do training and education for lawyers and business of law professionals. So I absolutely help it write SOWs, or I'll just do a brain dump during a client call and of notes, and I'll throw that in and I'll say, hey, can you give me a summary of this and put it in an email back to me and my client. I'll tell them the client, not name. I'll say like they're a learning and development director at a large firm, right? And they've asked me about this as their notes. They didn't join me on this one, I don't think, but I actually have a little meeting bot that joins all of my Zoom calls. And it's sitting in the back right now and it's listening to my language. It's listening to my tone. If a bunch of us were talking. So it's not I just transcribing, but it's listening for follow-ups, action items, confusion, and it will generate a report after each one of my meetings that is right there in my inbox. It's just amazing. So I absolutely do use it.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
And I also used GPT-4 to help me build an outline for this presentation that Josh and I went through and sort of we refined and we revised it. And then I also used it to help me create a catchy title for today's webinar. I find it's really good at like making fun, engaging kind of titles, as well as I used it to help create just a general description of the sessions so that we could post that on Eventbrite. So really, that kind of thing, it doesn't take that long, but without GPT, it probably would have taken me maybe half an hour to do that. But instead it took 10 to 15 minutes. So any other questions?
I got a bunch of connect requests on LinkedIn. Thank you. Keep those coming, please, because again, if you get in my feed or you can message me and ask me any follow-ups, happy to.
And also I would really encourage people to try the free email course. I did it myself when it first came out. I committed to actually reading it every day and practicing the tips and guidance that Josh gives in the courses, and that's how I got into using GPT. And I feel like I'm really good now at just like having a dialogue and iterating with it to get from it what I really want.
Yeah, on that email course, it's super easy. You get prompts in the very first one, so you can start to play with this immediately. Again, I'm not trying to sell you anything. I'm just trying to help folks out and get them into this so they're using it and they see the power of it, because it's really useful. It really is a game changer in many ways.
I agree. All right, well, we're at time. So I just want to say thank you so much to Josh for taking the time and for sharing such interesting and important information on generative AI with us. This has been a really great session. The session has been recorded, and we'll send a link out to it probably sometime next week. And of course, many thanks to all of you as well for attending today, and we're wishing you a wonderful rest of the day. Bye.
Yeah.